on your what we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party.
What's up, party people in the place to be? It's your boy, the MCEO, the BKMC, Talib Kweli. How you doing? I am coming to you live from beautiful downtown Austin, Texas. That's right, we still in Austin. We still quarantining. We still in the bubble. We staying COVID-free. We getting tested every day. We are blessed and privileged to be able to do this. I hope everybody else who is not having the same amount of privileges out there doing what they need to do to be vigilant and stay safe. As always and as usual, I have my lovely and talented and funny and thought-provoking best co-host in the game from the world's best podcast, People's Party, Jasmin Leigh. How you doing, Jasmin?
Hello, I'm doing great. I'm just praying for your nostrils, Talib. That's a lot of testing.
Oh, man, yeah, my nostrils are getting violated every day. I like your turtleneck. Is it turtleneck season already over there in LA?
It's never turtleneck season in LA, but it's turtleneck season everywhere else, so we're going to wear it.
Word up, word up, word up. Well, I'm very excited about today's show. I'm excited about every show, but today's show, we get to do something unique. We get to shine a light on an MC that I'm gonna just go ahead and say it. I don't think gets nearly enough light shine on her as an artist. Today's guest is absolutely one of the most prolific MCs working in hip hop, and that's coming from me. And I'm somebody who tours or used to tour before the pandemic, 200 days a year with 10 albums under her belt in just 1 decade and no signs slowing down. She is a deep thinker. From Journey of the Starseed in 2010 to The Book of Light to Supernova to Stardust to Babylon, even the titles are poetic and powerful. We're talking about Ether Wars, Nebuchadnezzar, Gift of the Magi, Extraterrestrial. Then there are mixtapes, The Legend of Black Moses, EPs, Astral Chronicles, Metamorphosis. And this year, she dropped that I will say is the hip hop album of the year for my money. It's her Rhymesayers debut, one of the best rap albums I've heard in a long time, The Sharecropper's Daughter. Hip Hop Golden Age called it an excellent album, one of the best of the year, refined production with soulful and musical boom bap beats, serves as the perfect backdrop for Sha-Rock's powerful vocals. She once again proves she's an elite MC and a great singer as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Sha-Rock. I'm talking about a lyrical powerhouse, an educator, a storyteller, an activist, ether in female form, as she likes to call herself, regular person, extraordinary MC is what she calls herself, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that she's also an extraordinary person. The goddess MC, Sha-Rock. How you doing, Sha-Rock?
Welcome.
Got me over here tearing up. I'm like,
Oh, that's you.
I mean, but it just means so much coming from you. To hear that is just, we'll get into it, I'm sure, talking about my journey, but like, you know, your music and what you've done has influenced me in so many ways. So like to hear those words coming out of your mouth is, it's just, oh.
Well, I love that. And as you said, we are going to get into it, and it's mutual. You know, you may feel that way about me, but I absolutely feel that way about you. And that's what I want to showcase here is how much I'm inspired by you as an MC, because this show is about the culture. The show is never about trends or gossip. It's about the culture and the art and the craft of not just hip hop, but people surrounding hip hop. And we talk to all types of people. We talk to actors, comedians, chefs, you know, but the MCs is the genesis of it. It's like when Jay-Z wrote his book. I forget the name of the book, but he talks a lot about how if it wasn't for that pen game, that none of what he has would be possible.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you know, I'm seen as a billionaire and an ill businessman, but it really starts with the MCing. And I'm honored and privileged to have you here. I'm excited to talk about your incredible MCing. So yes, indeed. So yeah, I'm in Austin, Texas with Dave Chappelle. He has created a bubble out here, and you grew up in D.C., the same area that Chappelle grew up in, around, I think, the same times, very like towards the end or towards the height of the crack epidemic in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City. There was all types of like, you know, D.C. was used as a political football for so long because of what was going on in the city in terms of crime and drugs and everything. How did that experience find its way into your work and your creativity?
You know, DC was such an interesting environment. And in particular, my environment was so interesting because I grew up in a 2-parent home of parents who were, cultural, African-centered, spiritual. We went to Pan-African-centered schools. And so we had all these books and education, but like I'm in a neighborhood where every family's parents, were victims of the crack epidemic, where we'd be outside playing double dutch and see jump out boys just pop up, and we could
stepping on crack vials and all that.
Right, exactly.
I had a similar experience, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was at the time where, DC was murder capital. I experienced a lot, like seeing my father shot and, having my own family suffer from, addiction. So like for me, music has always been a cathartic tool, creative expression in general. So I used music and writing as a way to channel those experiences, tragedies, trauma, the history of my experience, and kind of work through that and kind of like parse through what the jewels that I learned from that, or parse through like some of these darker moments or kind of things that could be harmful and were harmful as I was growing, and finding the triumph in the midst of that. So yeah, like I had, it was just really interesting, to go to school and, hear Kwame Ture speaking to you. Like Kwame Ture is at your school.
Yeah.
Haile Gerima is at your school, you know what I'm saying? And then you go home again and you see like the little crack baggies and, friends getting killed and all that stuff. So it was just kind of those things helped to form and shape me, as well as the music, because DC's music, the go-go scene, the whole punk scene, hip hop. So interesting cocoon from which I was bred.
That's right. You and I share so many experiences. You just telling that story reminds me of my story in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were educators. Your father's an artist. Your parents are avid readers. My parents were avid readers as well. Why was it so important to grow up with books by Black authors in the house and, Black art on the walls and things of that nature?
Man, I mean, just the feeling of being seen and having your experience told, and having little brown girls and brown, boys like reflected back at you. I remember my parents had this book called The Maasai, and I just recently acquired it because I was like searching furiously on the internet. I need to have that. There was a Maasai book, photographs by Carol Beckwith, very popular during that time. Seeing that and seeing these beautiful, strong images of, Black aesthetic, dark brown skin and strong features and strong culture was so important. And I remember me and my sister used to we used to take baths together, and we would soap up our legs and try to draw the designs that the Maasai, patterns and stuff that they would draw on their legs. And that just provided a sense of just the pride that was so necessary. The sense of self-worth, that whether we were in the diaspora or we were on the continent, that despite, the world telling us that, we come from nothing, or, we're, just diminishing our accomplishments or straight stealing our accomplishments, like there was so much of that present. We just had to find it. And because my parents surrounded us with that Black art, we knew about, since my father was an artist, he would teach us about Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden, and my mother, we were reading, Langston Hughes and Toni Morrison and all these things very early. So just understanding how important our culture was and how significant it was for us to have our voices, our stories be reflected in the broader conversation.
Yeah, that representation is so important, and it extends beyond just what's on the walls, but also your attribute. I am named with an African name. My brother has an African name. My kids have African names. Your real name is Assata. You're named after Assata Shakur, one of the primary, most important key figures of the Black liberation movement. And your MC name, Sha-Rock, is a tribute to Sha-Rock, female MC pioneer. Tell me about how Assata Shakur, tell me about the juxtaposition of Assata Shakur and Sha-Rock and how that forms you as an artist.
I mean, both are so essential to the culture, but to have women who were traversing uncertain terrain, both of them, Assata during the Black Power movement, when, so many activists were being targeted, as she was so, viciously targeted, but still, fighting, still pushing, still being vocal, still being present. And then Sha-Rock, she's in a group of all dudes, she's, in a culture where many women were present, but it was still dominated by men. And, holding her own and asserting her own and being that pioneer. So having women who were so outspoken, and women who were, maybe they were fearful at some point, but they didn't show it. They were, they didn't let that stop them or thwart, their mission to advance certain aspects or advance what was necessary for the people, whether it was through culture or whether it was through liberation, political liberation. So yeah, both of those things, both of those women are like so important to me. And I actually had the opportunity to speak with Sha-Rock through, yeah, she reached out to me. She got my number through BAM, and she called me on the phone, and I was like, who is this? This is Sha-Rock. I'm like, what? And she's telling me like, yo, I think you're so dope. Oh my God, I've been wanting to talk to you for so long. The last time I felt like this about a women MC is when Lauryn Hill was out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like crying because, this woman who literally is embodied through my name. And I didn't find out about her until after I started rhyming, after I had chosen the name, actually. I had chosen the name for other reasons. And then once I found out, I added that as a way to honor her. Wow. And she just was so ebullient in her praise of me. And I felt so, taken aback by that someone who had done so much for women in hip hop, for us who were still kind of trying to struggle to navigate this world, and find our place in this world, that she felt this way about my music. So things just come full circle, and I'm still trying to, meet with Queen Mother Assata Shakur.
I got to meet Assata a few years ago. That's one of the turning points of my life, not just artistically, but just definitely like me and her, and rest in peace to Nahanda Abiodun, who was also arrested and headed to Cuba with Assata, and she passed away recently. But she was the catalyst for that meeting. She took myself and M1 and Yasin Bey and High Tech, to meet Assata. It was a beautiful time.
I know it was. Like some of my earliest performances were like the activist community and the independent hip hop community in Atlanta, were kind of linked, very, very, very much linked. And my first performance was a tribute to Dr. Mutulu Shakur, and like I would annually perform at Sisters for Assata, which was a fundraiser for, Sister Nahanda and Assata Shakur. So like, like that's always just been kind of present in, throughout the course of my career and then my life in general.
On the Metamorphosis EP, you say that your parents had you chanting mantras at 6 years old. In Not Safe for Weak Rappers, you share a mantra. Was this one of the ones your parents taught you? And also, how important is it for you to teach young women these things at such a young age?
Actually, my parents, they were like Afro hippies. So like they studied transcendental meditation in the 70s. So like we had a family mantra. So they taught us that and taught us meditation at a very early age. The Om Mani Padme Hum is something that I learned later in life. But for me, affirmations and mantras and meditations, we talk about word sound power and the importance of expressing these, being intentional about the words that we speak to the universe. For me, meditation is so powerful because having those moments of self-reflection and having moments where you can connect to the larger universal consciousness and creator energy is the way that we kind of find our own internal power. So it's important for me to imbue my music with aspects of that, because it's been so like transcendental for me, and transformative for me.
You mentioned Haile Gerima earlier, right? That's the director of the movie, creator of the movie Sankofa, which is, if you haven't seen it, for people who are watching, make sure you get your hands on a copy of Sankofa. Is one of the most powerful film experiences I've ever had. And you also mentioned, Sha-Rock, that you went to the Sankofa Institute, which is a Pan-African institute. I am a huge fan of Pan-Africanism. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that there's a great pushback in Black communities against Pan-Africanism right now. There's very sort of nativist, nationalist movements. And when I say national, I'm not talking about cultural Black nationalism. I'm talking about like people like America, but like Black people. So I'd like you as a student of Pan-Africanism to share why you think it's important to take a Pan-Africanist approach to the world.
Well, one thing is, there is this myth that Black people, African people, are the minority.
Word.
And we look at it in the context of this country, we can say that is very well true. But when we look at it, in the context of the broader land masses of the world, that is certainly not true. Mm-hmm. And we have always historically exchanged ideas, gotten inspiration from one another's movements. We have had meetings of the minds from, Kwame and Nkrumah and W.B. Du Bois and what's so absurd about this movement is that the very people that they seek to exclude from this idea of Blackness are critical to our understanding of what Blackness is, as an identity, as a consciousness. So like the people like, the Walter Rodneys and people like the Ivan Van Sertima's and people like even Malcolm X, whose mother was from the islands.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. There's a book called Holding Aloft the Banner of Ethiopia that talks, Marcus Garvey, that talks about the contributions of, Caribbean people, Black Caribbean people, in the resistance movement. And how it was so critical to our movement as well, and like vice versa. Pre-Nelson Mandela, not pre, he was a part of the movement as well, but like when there were other kind of more vocal and notable voices in South Africa, there were the activists in South Africa were looking at what we were doing in the States, and as inspiration and motivation. So it's important for us as all of us having experienced, I'm talking about African people in the diaspora, experience the impact of, the transatlantic slave trade, the impact of slavery in general, and then creating something beautiful out of that, and creating a radicalism and creating activism out of that, as well as, continental Africans who have suffered through colonialism. I think that it's important for us to kind of grow together. When we talk about, the idea, and we were talking about when the idea of the OAU was being formed, we were talking, they're talking about, aligning African countries so they can be a stronger unit. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what we need. The tool of divide and conquer has been used by oppressors for hundreds and hundreds of years, millennia.
That's the whole point, right? That's the whole game. That's
the point for us to look at each other like we're enemies. So we don't understand how powerful we are. We're sitting here isolated in our islands or, in these nations that do not at all have our best interest in mind. So it's just, it's important for us to exchange dialogue and have these conversations about like why these groups are feeling the need to exclude or other people outside of America. Have these conversations. Is it because of reparations that they feel are...
Yeah. So that's a lot of them are purporting to be about reparations, but interesting thing about that is that the very reason why we deserve reparations and why Black people born in America have a unique justice claim, and we absolutely deserve reparations and we should demand reparations. But the reason why we have this unique claim is because of our connection to the diaspora. Without our connection to Africa, without our connection to other Africans, if we're just Americans, then why do we deserve reparations? We don't deserve reparations for the American part. We deserve reparations for the African part.
Mm-hmm.
And we have built our own unique culture here, but the culture doesn't start, our experience doesn't start here on this country.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying? This history.
And it's dismissive to our ancestors and to our elders and people came before us to say that our history starts with the slave trade in America.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's why we need more programs to teach us about more than just what happened in America. And that's why education is so important. And during your teen years, you were part of a theater program called City of Peace, which was devoted to encouraging young students and artists to express their realities and become active in their communities. How did that experience help you open up and find your art and your stories you wanted to tell?
It forced me to be honest with myself. So growing up in this household, you know, my father was an artist. My sister is an artist as well, and they dance and all that. I was more of I guess you could say academic. Like I was really good in school, but I didn't feel like I had the creative part, you know.
That's interesting.
But I had people throughout my life who were encouraging me to embrace that side. But it wasn't until City at Peace that kind of taught me to be comfortable in my body and comfortable with the way that I expressed through my body and through my voice. And what the program was is they encouraged young people to write the play based on their own experiences that oftentimes left them feeling powerless. You know, the things that we were either afraid or didn't feel comfortable vocalizing. So putting my finger on the things that made me feel uncomfortable was liberating. You know, was liberating that, you know, we're all these awkward teenagers who are learning like dance routines and, you know, speaking our truths on stages in front of our families, some of who were the source of some of these traumas, you know. So I think it just made me feel comfortable being on stage. And it's a funny thing because, you know, I said that, you know, I never felt like I had the creative gene or whatever. But like one of my early teachers who actually was the one who brought like Kwame Ture to our school to hear us speak and was the one who brought Haile Garima to the school was this woman named Hassanatu Kamara, who was actually in the film Sankofa. But she was like an activist and a creative and a writer and all that. And she would always tell me like, what are you doing? Like, stop being so self-conscious. Stop worrying about what other people think. And oftentimes they would be peppered with curse words and, you know, she would be snapping on us like, you know. Right. But it was essentially, she was one of the first people that kind of snapped me out of that. And one of the earliest pieces that we learned how to do was, that we performed was Ego Tripping by Nikki Giovanni. And we talked earlier about like culture and how important like culture was in hearing these Black voices. That song, which my parents had on record and I was already familiar with, but having to perform that song, talking about, you know, I turned myself into myself and was Jesus, you know, having to perform those words, kind of made me feel, or it ignited some of that power within me and made me feel how important it was for me to be able to express that part of myself. So City at Peace kind of furthered that journey for me.
Word. And you went from that situation to finding yourself at Howard University, studying biology. Listening to your music, I could tell that you know more about biology than most people. There's a lot of like biological references all scattered through your lyrics. But I guess my question for you about Howard, a disproportionate amount of our guests are people who come from HBCUs. A lot of our guests have come from Howard University. So in your estimation, why is it so important for Black people in America to have that academic university space for intellectual freedom?
Man, it's just affirmative. Like, I think that it is so impactful to have, like, when I went to my arts and sciences building, it was named after Alain Locke, the father of the Harlem Renaissance. One of the theaters in the fine arts school is named after Roxy Roker. So it's just really, for me, I had experienced that my entire life, being around Black educators. But for many people, they might not have had that same experience. They might not have had, access to a Kiswahili class. Luckily,
Right.
I had the privilege of being able to attend a school where Kiswahili was taught, where African languages were taught. But going to Howard and being able to, not having these European languages be paramount, not having, but having, Yoruba language being taught and Kiswahili being taught, and having, a Pan-African, a class on Pan-Africanism being taught by a Black person, my math class, pre-calculus class being taught by a Jamaican brother. And hearing like these unique experiences and having them, tell us personal stories about, their upbringing and how they came to Howard, and, then going out onto the lawn and seeing the African fraternity, sorority, ubiquity, like having their ceremonies, and then having the Greeks, parade across the yard, and just like being a part of that full Blackness. It was like a cocoon, it was like a safety net. It was a safe space for us to be, free to express our ideas, to just inspire one another. Like it was something different, something really, really special. And then not to mention homecoming. I mean,
Oh man.
Homecoming, although FAMU's homecoming is probably the best of all the HBCUs. Yes, I'm biased. But
I don't know about that.
yes, I'm biased. But both my parents are Bisons. We go through this every year, especially whenever we play Howard. My child can only go to FAMU or Howard for undergrad. That's just,
I'm not gonna lie. When I was coming up, one of the main things you could do was go to Howard's homecoming, and this was like the Diddy era when Diddy was throwing parties. You know what I'm saying? It was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was dangerous. It was thought-provoking. It was all of those things that DC was at the time.
Yes, yes. Because it was a shame, too, because Howard is like right in the middle of the hood. And like being from there, I know how to like which streets I need to go down. Right. But then, some of the other students were like get robbed and stuff like that. So it was crazy. It was crazy. Because then you would hear a lot of people from up north. I ain't saying you ever did this, but like people from up north would like talk about the DC accent and like, chalk on us Bamas and stuff,
New York does that to everybody. In New York, we call niggas from New Jersey Bamas.
Another thing that I loved about going to the HBCU is that you get to see so many different types of Black people, because the outside world, they really always like to put us in one circle. And you have like the comic book nerds, you have the Black rockers, you have the Black hip hop heads. Like it's so many different types of Black that you get to see and just really love your people.
Word. That's important. Now you went from Howard to Atlanta around a time when Atlanta's always been a super Black city, but Atlanta was, becoming sort of the home of hip hop. In my estimation, ever since Andre 3000 said the South got something to say at the 95 Source Awards, from that point on, after Goody Mob dropped Soul Food, Atlanta's really been holding the torch for hip hop commercially, creatively, and certainly business wise. Now it's also the home of strip club culture. And you a conscious MC, just like I am. I remember going to a strip club. And, as a rapper, you walk in a strip club and they are obligated to play your song, right? So I got songs that I feel like could work in a strip club, but they not my popular songs. My most popular song is Get By. So I walked in a strip club and the DJ threw on Get By and the girls was just half-heartedly dancing to Get By. Like they didn't really want to be dancing to that. You understand? So I want to ask you as an Atlanta resident, do you get any strip club play?
I have no idea.
You don't go to strip clubs?
No, I have been to one, But no, I that is definitely not part of my social experience. Most people, they might be rocking Goddess Gang in there. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Let me talk about that for a second, because I want to talk about Sharecropper's Daughter later, because that album just blew me away. But Goddess Gang in particular, you're right. As I'm asking this question, I'm thinking, well, what record would work from Sha-Rock? It would be Goddess Gang. That record is so incredible because it has pop sensibilities. It has sort of trap sensibilities, but it doesn't compromise at all with the lyrics, with the knowledge. And it's sort of like what I've always employed in my career, this Trojan horse approach to releasing music. Is like, I'm going to give you something that you can dance to. I'm going to give you something that you could turn up to, but I'm not going to flinch at all when it comes to my messaging. And, Goddess Gang as a phrase, I'm not a woman, but I can only imagine. That seems like such an empowering phrase, and the way in which you say it on the track is really, really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as I've advanced in my career, it's easy to be in your own little world, like just writing and trying to figure out how you can like broaden your base and broaden your platform. But as you perform, you hear so much from, women who have been, who use you as a source of inspiration, who have been influenced by you, who are empowered by your presence on stage, and use that empowerment and take it into their lives. So it was important for me to create a song to not only celebrate the women who have inspired me immensely, but also to kind of dispel this notion that women, when we get together, it's always about competition and tearing each other down. And, and this song talks about like the importance of squadding up, the importance of like, if I shine, you shine, and kind of dismissing these kind of staid interpretations of what femininity is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, how it's supposed to sound. Cause I used to get that a lot, like a lot of critique of how I postured and stuff. She too masculine. Like, I like what she's saying, but she too masculine, or, why her voice sound like that? And, just all of this like critique of how I presented myself as an artist. And I wanted to affirm that like the way that I present myself will be done on my own terms. And the way that the women in my life and I roll will be based on how we choose to do it. It won't be dictated by the way, society thinks that we should act, behave, the volume of our voices, how we should assert ourselves. So yeah, that song is really important. And I've had people tell me like they played it at their baby shower, and like this one sister told me that she played that during the birth of her child.
That works.
Like that, I was that like,
works.
It's just really, really something when people share these things with you, and then you really understand how important it is for you to continue on, continue to speak about these things that may not get the light and the shine. My journey, I'm sure, would have been cut in half had I chosen to take a different route or listen to people who tried to tell me what I should be doing, That's right. But this is these things, when I hear these women talk about this, when I hear these women like jumping up and down talking about Goddess Gang, when I hear guys who like, they be bouncing too, rocking the Goddess Gang shirts too. Like, it just really be like this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm meant to do. And I'm going to keep doing it.
Word up. It's also important to have a good team, and good people around you to lift you up. And on the song Ether Wars, which is another great song you have, you rap, if there's any questions, you can answer to Messiah. Now, for people who don't know, Soul Messiah has been in your corner since damn near the beginning. He is an Atlanta OG, very respected for his contributions to that scene. And I've known you for quite some time, and it's very powerful to know that you keep your A1s and your day ones at the same. Like, every time I see you, it's like I'm rocking with Soul Messiah. He's DJing for you and all that. So tell me about the creative relationship, the family relationship you developed with Soul Messiah, and why it's so important to have such a good working relationship with one specific creative like that.
So when I started, he was doing like a lot of work with different artists in Atlanta, and it was real casual. It was not, very intentional on my part. Like I'm gonna do this rap thing. It was kind of like, let me just see, let me see how I sound being recorded, like over one of your beats or whatever. So I just took one of my poems that I had written and hopped on one of his beats, and that's how the story began. Like he heard something and was like, okay, we can do this. But the important thing for me is he taught me so much about what it means to be an MC. I feel like I had always been a passive listener to hip hop. By that, I mean that I wasn't like, I had songs that I love. I had music and artists that I listened to that I love, but I wasn't one of those people who like could, recite a whole album back and forth and tell you the dates when this came out and all of that. So there was a lot about rap that I didn't know. He taught me what a 16 was, which is like the foundation of what it means to rhyme. So he told me what a 16 was. He was the first person who kind of taught me or encouraged me to use my voice, like, use my singing voice to do like harmonies and stuff like that, and so he was privy to my development as an MC. So he was able to create music that highlighted my strengths as an artist, whether he would, drop out the beat or like, add like little, change like the pitches to my voice. And, he did all these kind of creative things that kind of like brought out what I was capable of. And then as time went on, as I grew, as I strengthened my skills, we almost had like this unspoken thing where, he knew what kind of thing that I was looking for. Or I could ask him like, yo, I want something that's this, this kind of vibe, or it's like something gritty or whatever, or I want like this sample or whatever. And he could look for it and create something like that for me. And that created a consistency that I think lent itself well to the music that we put out, and I think that it allowed our music to be easily identifiable. And we think about like these pairs of producer MCs, Premier Guru, and we, Pete Rock, CL Smooth,
right, me and High Tech,
exactly. It's a sound. It's and it's almost so seamless. So I think that's the beautiful thing, and it doesn't sound, the albums sound like they're very like congruent, they have a flow to them. And I think I credit that to the fact that I work with him, I work exclusively with him.
In your song Forever, you open up a little bit about your experience with self-harm when you were a teenager, rapping about taking pills to get rid of your body fat and how you still have scars on your wrists from cutting. What inspired you to dive into that dark part of your life in song, and why is it so crucial that we face those issues in art?
I think, again, I talk about like the healing power of music. And the type of music that always like resonated with me was the kind that like told personal stories. And for me, that was a story that I had never really told. Something quite honestly I was ashamed of, but I realized years later that it become such a part of me that I didn't even notice like these. I didn't even notice the scars anymore, And when reflecting on it, I was like, wow, this has become a part of me, and it has been a part of my development into the woman I am now. And at the time, while it was so traumatic for me, it was so hurtful. I was kind of like in this really dark space, going through that and finding, that clarity and finding that light was so was a lengthy journey. But when I thought about it, I was like, okay, this is something that, we don't talk about a lot. We talk about, we're supposed to hide, those things. We're supposed to hide those unsavory bits of ourselves. When we ask each other, like, how we're doing, we don't really want to know how the person is really doing. We just want like this perfunctory answer of like, I'm good,
Right.
But what would happen if we talked about those things? Would there then be someone who's like, yo, like, I felt that way too, or I went through that too, and I needed to hear that, And I thought about like, if my teenage self, if my preteen self had heard this song, would things have turned out differently? And I don't regret the things that, I experienced. I think that they made me a stronger person, and they made me wiser in many ways. But for me, it was important for me, especially during like the whole social media age, where this illusion of perfection is like imposed upon us,
Yes.
It was important for me to create something that was just like, yo, like, you are so beautiful just the way you are. You don't need to like mirror someone else's life. You don't need to hide these things. And I've been seeing so much more of that, women who are like burn victims, who are, proudly like showing their skin, people, Keke Palmer just like revealed like,
Yes.
Oh man, that was so excellent for her to make that post. I was blown away.
oh, beautiful. So
You're so beautiful.
yeah. And so, it was just like, we're done hiding. We are so dope like we are. Of course, there's always the potential for growth and change, but the things that fundamentally make us who we are, we shouldn't have to hide that because we're trying to adhere to this like societal standard of normality or like perfection.
No, I agree. And that's, I always say on this show that social media is a gift and a curse. And one of the gifts is being able to be invited inside of people's vulnerable moments. Because for Keke Palmer, as we were just talking about, for her to post that and to show her skin when her skin always looks flawless, it really touched me because whenever I have skin problems, it's like, I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to post on social media. I go into hiding, but it's a normal thing. And songs like you have, like, there's a lot of teens that are out there, cutting themselves or trying to get skinny. And I remember the Saved by the Bell episode used to always resonate with me when Jessie was taking those pills and she ended up like passing out or whatever. And I was like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to end up, how she did.
Yeah.
That is funny because that episode, like, I remember that episode, like, like it was yesterday. But like it's important. It's important for me to like keep that realness, that transparency to a certain extent, because you have to hold certain things to yourself. Like it's necessary to maintain a sense of privacy because people already get extra. They be like, Assata Perkins, coming up to me at shows talking about Assata Perkins. I'm like, I'm Sha-Rock in this realm. Like,
right.
we not. I know you looked at your Wikipedia and everything, but yeah. It's important to maintain that sense of privacy. But for me, like, it's also important to allow people to see that you are a human being. And, while there is a certain mysticism and mystery surrounding artists, it is, it's you're able to reach people so much more deeply when you reveal yourself to just be like a real person, Yeah. And you could change so much just by like putting a few little jewels in there, like a little personal moments that people be like, oh man, I connect to that.
Word. You mentioned growth and change, and I want to share with you a story of how you helped me grow and change. As a female MC, you don't always want to be classified or qualified with a qualifier. Like, I'm an MC, like, and not for nothing, I'm better than most of these dudes too. You know what I'm saying? Like, so to add the female MC thing, and I've always been sensitive by that and triggered by that when it comes to me. I've pushed back against the title, conscious MC. One thing that really bothered me when I started my career was alternative hip hop. They like, with Kweli and Most Def and them do, that's alternative hip hop. You into that alternative hip hop. I'm like, nah, what we do is hip hop. That other shit y'all listen to on the radio, maybe that's an alternative. But, that's not what we do is hip hop. So I resisted calling hip hop anything but hip hop. So when I first started coming in contact with you, I first started paying attention to you as an artist, you had coined the phrase God hop. And you and I have a mutual friend, Wisdom Salah. I have a book coming out. I talk about her in my book. I talk about conversations that we've had. But she was working with you or running with you at one point, and she brought you to my attention, and she was like, "Have you heard of Sha-Rock?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the lady who does God Hop, right?" And me and her had this conversation where I was like, I don't know if I like the term God Hop, because if she's doing hip hop, why not just call it hip hop? Why does she feel the need to qualify it as something else when people are already going to do that to her? But what I realize now, as I've grown as a man, is that I was applying how I felt about my experience and my music to you. And it wasn't fair for me to put that on you because of my experience. It's perfectly okay for me to say, well, what I do is hip hop, but for Sha-Rock to be like, well, what I do is God Hop. And I began to embrace the term after Wisdom Salad first brought it up to me. So tell me about how you came up with the term God Hop.
So God Hop was, I mean, because when we started, it was kind of around the time that trap music was getting real popular at the time. And there was this dismissal of, quote unquote conscious hip hop. And I was like, you know what? We're going to lean all the way into this thing, because I'm not ashamed of creating music that's thought provoking. I'm not ashamed of creating music that's politically and socially aware. And look at me. They're going to make assumptions about what I do and put me in a category, regardless of whether I do it. So I'm going to do it first. And the type of music that we were doing was music that spoke to, certain themes of enlightenment, different spiritual faiths. We dealt with like different kind of cosmic concepts. And it was something that was very, very unique. There were others who had done, music like that. We talk about Rakim, we talk about, J Electronica and stuff. But we decided to kind of lean all the way into that. And it actually set me apart, especially saying, calling myself the Goddess MC. It created a level of kind of understanding or respect for who I was out the gate. There was a certain level of, oh, well, I already know, she's not going to tolerate this, or we're not going to ask her to do this, or we wouldn't dare to, put her on this in this mix or whatever. So it was important for me to kind of create something that was our own lane before the industry tried to do that for me.
Word. I'm glad you did it too. Wisdom Salah also works with and is friends with David Banner. David Banner is also on The Who, on Nebuchadnezzar. That's a very dope conceptual song. And you and me and Wiz, we all share the light that is David Banner in our lives. So I want you to talk to people a little bit about how important David Banner is as an artist and how important his journey has been, because there are still people who think of David Banner as just a pimp dude. But even when he was doing that record, he was doing Malcolm X grassroots movement, community activism work with organizations that I was down with. He was showing up for the people. So talk to me about your relationship with Mr. David Banner.
Yeah, I met Banner through Soul Messiah, who's known him for years. I think he knew him even before like at the start of his career. So when I was introduced to him, he had already kind of started on his path of as a speaker, as an educator, and he had started doing like the panels and things like that, like his lectures. And he always talked about the importance of being able to relate, while he had come so far, from his Like a Pimp days. And like you said, like he told me he already knew about, Tony Browder, and he was reading Now Valley Contributions to Civilization and, at that time. But it was important for him to not take the path of some people who start to become educated about, the culture and the people and become more socially and politically aware, to feel like they're separate from the people.
Yeah.
You know, it was important for him to kind of maintain that that sense of connection and realness and understanding of that environment, and while also kind of expanding the conversation, you know, and helping to educate and enlighten those same environments that he came out of. So he's like so powerful, but he's also hilarious and like just so dedicated to, you know, his people and the struggle, and then just like broadening what we do, you know, because sometimes, you know, we stay at a certain level sometimes in the conscious community, the cultural community, or whatever. We know what we know the grassroots, you know, style we do, but you know, him expanding that, you know, having his own, you know, podcast like what you're doing, and like, you know, growing it so that eventually, you know, perhaps there's a we have, you know, television media spaces and all of these things. So like him to have that vision is just so important, and he's so special and so crucial to the movement. And he's always been like super supportive of what I've done. So I appreciate him for that. Like he do shows and lectures and stuff at the Shrine of the Black Madonna. But you know, this is a man who was riding around on $1 million tour bus. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you know, it's important for him to be present, and for us to, you know, show our support for him.
He's so present at all times as well.
He's also a good actor. I didn't know he was on Saints and Sinners too.
Oh yeah, he's been doing his acting thing for a minute now. That man is a Renaissance man. Now, obviously, you're a conscious MC, but beyond being a conscious MC, you dive deep into 5% philosophy. And the song True Mastery, you know, the song Hood Supreme, it's like got some Wu-Tang vibes on it. You know, I am somebody who was raised in 5% communities. And just like any other community, there can be, you know, patriarchy can sometimes rear its ugly head. But on that same song, you pull off almost a magic trick on True Mastery. You talk about 5% philosophy, you dive into it, but you also support icons of womanism like Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde. You shout out My Sister's Keeper. Now, some of the themes that feminists who later started calling themselves womanists, like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and them, dive into, sometimes they conflict with some of the themes in the 5% philosophy. And that's why I call what you did on that song a magic trick. So how do you balance the sometimes competing philosophies to find intersectionality between a more sort of a 5% type of philosophy and the ideals of womanism?
You know, I'm a student of the universe, so I can take and find jewels in everything. And I think that, you know, it's important for us to not be so narrow that once something is at conflict with what we know to be true or our beliefs, that we just throw the whole thing out. So for me, the lessons were important to my foundation of discovering who I was, you know, just as important as, you know, studying the works of someone like Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, and these important voices. And they both shape me, and they both shape how I view the world. And it's funny because I have, you know, had, you know, gods come to me like, yeah, but, you know, a Black woman, she can't be the goddess or whatever. But through my music, they kind of changed their position. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what a goddess does, right?
That's exactly what it is. And when we intersect these conversations, when we join these seemingly different points of view, we allow the conversation to expand and allow people who have the potential to remain dogmatic in the way that they view things to kind of open up their perception of, you know, what is truth, you know. And so, yeah, it's important for me to kind of like add every part of what has shaped and formed me intellectually and culturally as a person to add those things in.
Yeah, you do it in fine fashion.
Thank you.
Can you dive into how you linked up with Rhymesayers?
Oh, when did I in 20, but I did Soundset. They had this festival.
It's a great festival. It's one of my favorite shows to do. Shout out to Rhymesayers, that whole crew, and the Soundset situation is, man.
And that was the biggest hip hop festival that I had ever attended. Mm-hmm. They invited me to perform in, what was it, 2014? And unbeknownst to me, one of the early members of the label was a fan of the music. He's like a super music head, DJ, you know, he knows everything about everything in music. He loves to go on the, not the dark web, but like the furthest recesses of the internet to find like people who are, you know, not necessarily mainstream or whatever. So he had found my music, and he would like be playing it in the office, and the label owner would hear it, and then like he said the third time he heard it, he was like, "Yo, who is that?" And told me it was Sha-Rock. So they were, you know, he started listening to the music. He was like, "Okay, let's bring her out to Soundset to see, you know, if she can perform, if she can connect to people." And so came out to Soundset. Actually, it was 2015. Yeah. Came out to Soundset, performed this huge, massive, they got Ferris wheels. They got like lowrider cars and DJs and like it's so dope. It's so dope. So I performed and I connected with them and we chopped it up or whatever. And then we started talking about doing a joint venture together. And it was interesting because we had done so much, you know, of our stuff thus far independently. And we could, if we decided next week we were going to drop an album, we could do that. And that was an interesting transition to go from that to now having to kind of like go through like more formal, you know, a more formal process. Like you got to submit stuff and like, you know, there needs to be a release date and time for promo and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting. But having a larger platform, you know, to provide that visibility, to have a team that is now like working your stuff, you know, working it through the proper channels and stuff like that. And it's tremendous, you know. And then also to be able to have that creativity, to be able to maintain that creativity, because you hear so many horror stories about going to labels and you got the A&R who's telling you need to do this. Oh, no, that's whack, you know, change this. And you feel less of an artist and more like a commodity. So it was dope to find a space that, you know, allowed me to do that freedom.
Shout out to Brother Ali too. I just spoke to him recently. He's out there in Turkey. The pandemic. He's like, I'm moving to Istanbul.
Yeah, he's straight dipped.
Now you and I are both fans of Octavia Butler. I've shouted her out on my songs. You in an interview you quoted a comment that Octavia Butler made, and I want to just read the comment because it's such a powerful comment, and I was inspired by it as well. Octavia Butler writes, "First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit will help you finish and polish your stories. Inspiration won't. Habit is persistence and practice." I just wanted to share that quote because it's such a powerful quote. But I bring Octavia Butler up because, you know, on some Afro-Futuristic shit, your work sometimes goes super, super nerdy. You reference Star Wars a lot, which endears you to my heart. I've heard you rap about Anakin and Padawans and all this. You know, shout out to Ninth Wonder and Young Guru, my fellow hip hop Star Wars super fans. You know, I just now got Metamorpheus, and which is a reference to Morpheus from The Matrix. You have an album called Extraterrestrial. How has science fiction and specifically Afro-Futurism impacted and shaped you as an artist?
Man, it expanded my idea of what was possible. I felt that when I discovered science fiction, when I discovered speculative fiction and discovered that we were doing it, it was like, wow. I mean, because you don't see, you know, the joke that black people aren't in space. You know what I'm saying? Because we're not shown. Like, I guess we got left behind. But like this, being able to think about something outside of the reality that we are constantly faced with, and to be able to think about other worlds, and what that can mean symbolically, creating, worlds beyond your reality, beyond what they say is possible, having, an imagination. And it kind of like speaks to like certain spiritual aspects when you talk about, affirming your reality, or like reshaping your reality by your thoughts and your words, and the power of how you think. So to read these works of Octavia, and read concepts that, like in her book, Dawn, that whole series, the Lilith's Brood series, some of the stuff I had to like reread. Well, a lot of the stuff I had to reread, because I'm like, yo, this is, I can't even like conceptualize this in my mind, some of these alien figures, and I loved how she always had this theme of, this symbiotic relationship through beings, through species. That was always kind of like this recurring theme throughout her work. But to be allowed to think beyond what our experience is supposed to be as Black people, as African people in this world, was really important, because sometimes it can feel, some of the things we have experienced are soul crushing, so to have these texts as life preservers, you know what I mean, as to what is possible, or a possible future for us, and our reality was so crucial to me.
Talib, you really make me want to get into Star Wars. One of these days I'm going to sit down and watch some.
We got to start with Star Trek first. I've been watching old Star Treks from the 60s because I was a kid when I first saw all of them, and I didn't understand the concepts. And they're a lot more woke and progressive than I even gave them credit for, with the original Star Trek series, the first 3 seasons. But Star Trek, because it predates Star Wars, and Star Wars is
I thought it was separate.
Yeah, it's definitely separate. Star Wars is more for the masses. It's more mainstream thing than Star Trek is. But I feel like with the foundation of Star Trek, you appreciate Star Wars even more.
All right, I'm gonna get on that. I'm gonna add that to my binge list.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. That's what it is. The Star Trek is on Netflix, so I've been watching those old. And sometimes they get really corny with the special effects and the outfits and
hard for me.
That's why
it's
hard
like
to
Power Rangers too. Power Rangers, I know it's not
It's worse
Star
than Power
Trek.
Rangers. I saw one recently. They had a dog dressed up like an alien, and I'm like, that's definitely a dog.
And it's still horrible special effects. I'm like, it's 2020. Why have y'all not upped the game up? But anyway.
I mean, everything gets better over time, right? Well, not everything, but most things get better over time. The acting is better over time. Like these were the premier actors of the day. Like William Shatner was one. He was considered like a top actor, but now we make fun of his acting style because it seems so corny.
Like when I was. Well, I used to watch like the old Star Treks back in the day, but like the Next Generation was my like.
Right. Patrick Stewart joint.
Yeah. But like now that I look back, and I hate that, but it's hard for me to like see like the technology and stuff. Like
I love it. I love seeing it. I love seeing how they problem solved. There's a lot of episodes where there would be clones and doppelgangers, and they would do the split screen thing in the 60s. I could see the split in the screen. You know what I'm saying? And then the way Shatner's acting, oh my God, and all that. He just because they come from theater, and TV was still kind of a fresh medium, so they're still acting for the stage and overdoing it. It's fun to watch for me.
Okay, the title of Sharecropper's Daughter pays homage to your father's experience growing up sharecropping tobacco. What is the message of the album, and can you speak a little bit about the generational inheritance of trauma?
So the album was my reflection on my foundation and the things that shaped me into who I was. And a large part of that, of course, was my father and the stories that he would recount to us about his experience, which were, very much about hardship and trauma and all of that. And I wanted to kind of juxtapose his experience growing up on this, sharecropper farm, on this sharecropping farm during the Jim Crow South, and my experience growing up in, during the 90s and the war on drugs and, you know, seeing the targeting of Black neighborhoods and, Black people, and how so many of his experiences, though like separated by decades, they mirrored one another. They mirrored mine. And how also like not addressing these things, both in my life and both in his life. He would share the stories, but he internalized so much of that and didn't really seek out a resource to kind of like allow him to function in a healthy way. And that was passed down to me, that I bore the weight of that. And that allowed, these things to kind of unhealthily manifest in me and my behaviors. And it wasn't until, recently when looking at like my journey, that I really wanted to kind of address, explore, and confront that. How we have, not only are these traumas written into our DNA to be transferred to our offspring, but the behaviors and are passed down, unknowingly. And in the same way that we think about inheritance, we think about, inheriting like things of value, we think about money and heirlooms and things like that. We inherit this pain. We inherit a pain so immense, that, it's historical. And we don't address it. We kind of take it as a matter of fact. And, we develop what we call these generational curses. But in essence, it's just a lack of kind of digging through and confronting and facing what the issue is and seeking help and talking about it, like really talking about it. And that's what I wanted to do with this, because there's still some aspects of my life, and when I listen to certain songs, that I can't listen to without like tearing up, because they're so dear to me. They're so fresh for me. And there were a lot of songs that I didn't even include on the album because they were so personal. But it's just it's a kind of wake up call to talk about, a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, we're always told as Black people, like, these things are so far in the past, to forget about it. When I was writing the album, The Sharecropper's Daughter, I thought about my father. I'm like, my father is still living. He was living during the time of, Emmett Till's murder. And like, we're, Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin, these young people were killed in very much the same way. And they continue to be. So this is something that we must expose, that the insidiousness of what America was, and continues to be, needs to be confronted, as well as, just Black families, just kind of like talking about our experiences, getting help, like therapy. I'm like such a big, proponent of us like getting therapy, because I feel like, so how when I think about like my past, and like I said, like every other street, unless it was the family that was Jehovah's Witness, like every other street, every parent, that was the jab. That was when we were fighting. That's why your father on crack, or that's why your sister, you know what I'm saying? Like, or that's why your father in jail, or whatever. And that was so like par for the course. But like, we go on, and those kids, we've grown up. And how has that like revealed itself in our own children's lives, or how, and how we like kind of walk through the world and perceive the world. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that on this album, and talk about the importance of, in the midst of all that, in the midst of the trauma, how do we find the triumph? How do we transmute that into something beautiful? How do we find, the resilience out of that? How do we find the transformation out of that? And if you listen to like the progression of the album, it starts off very, very kind of angry and kind of like frenetic and this stuff. And then it becomes a little bit more thoughtful and reflective, and then balanced, and then empowering towards the end. Cause I wanted to show like that journey.
It does take a lot of talking and a lot of growth, because when you talk about inheritance of trauma, the way me and my older siblings were raised and the way my younger siblings are being raised is completely different, because my parents have healed. And a lot of times my sister would be like, oh, well, they need a whooping. They got to do such and such. We didn't get to do such and such. And I'm like, because the way we did it was the wrong way. So now that she's doing the right way, let's celebrate that instead of being jealous, or instead of wanting them to go through those things that we did not like from our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Word. That's a great point. Sha-Rock, you mentioned Emmett Till earlier. You had the great lyric, y'all do it for MTV, I do it for Emmett Till. Such a great lyric. As I said at the top of the show, I was definitely blown away by Sharecropper's Daughter's album. And I've heard your music before. It's not that I didn't think that you could do it. I knew you could do it. I just didn't know I needed that album. You know, I didn't know that I needed it. You and I think because we're raised in a similar fashion, we've made similar music choices. On the song Lilith's Palm, there's a sample from Billy Brooke, 40 Days, also sampled on Tropical Quest, Lucky Lucienne, also sampled on Testify with me and Styles P. You have Styles P on this new album. You have my birthday twin, Black Thought, on this new album. And on the song End of the World, the sample is Airplane by We. Me and Static Selector also sampled that on a record called Home. On Rockwell's America, you actually say, all of us were struggling to get by, and the reflection was eternal. Talib gave us words to live by. I want to thank you for spitting that bar. I truly appreciate it.
I mean, I talked about in the beginning of the show, but man, it was really important for me to see that, to see y'all. You know, and reading, when I used to read about when magazines still existed, I used to read about, you know, your mom, your family's bookstore and stuff. It was important for me to see someone who came from, like you said, a similar background, you know, creating this music, creating this dope music, you know, hearing Brown Skin Lady, like it. I don't know. I don't have the words, because I remember like taking that CD when I first got it and creating a whole vibe, like changing the light bulb. Like, you know, we did the color light bulbs, going up and like burning incense, and me and my sister like listening to that album. And to be seen in a very specific way, in the era that we were starting to emerge. You know, we were starting to kind of like develop our style and the way we thought about the world, you know, rocking our fatigues and stuff like that. And to see you embodying that was so important for me. And that song, you know, to this day, it you know, it still, you know, has the same impact on me that it did when I first heard it. But you have to acknowledge those people who help to shape you and help to develop you and help to advance the culture, you know, and help to elevate the culture. That's one of the reasons why, you know, the song I did with Thought, you know, the Black Renaissance thing, like that was, you know, very intentional. When I think about, you know, the players of the Harlem Renaissance that were seeking to elevate Black culture from this designation of folkism that white America gave it, to elevate it into the conversation of classic, you know, American art, while, you know, utilizing aspects of you know, the negritude movement, and like, again, that whole Pan-Africanism thing comes into play. it was important for me to do that song. We talk about like elevating culture, like expanding the idea of what hip hop can be and where it can go. And we have, they have like at Harvard, they have what is that? The hip hop library or something like that.
Yeah, it's a Ninth Wonder and them curating.
Mm-hmm. And then, Ninth, he was, teaching, and like, so there are a lot of, there's the Nas Fellowship and all that stuff. So it's starting to, it has, made its way into academia, but it's still, there's still certain platforms where hip hop is not welcomed as a fine art, and that's,
Right.
I think that's, what you've done. I think that's what people like thought have done. And my intention is to carry on that tradition of classifying hip hop as a fine art. And that's refining those stories, refining the music. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's a quick story, what you just said about how hip hop is not always welcome in those spaces. And my mother is an academic. I did a talk at a college last year, and my mother was like, "Oh, you're speaking at college? I'll go to that." And I'll never forget this. We walked into the auditorium, and there was a DJ on stage spinning records. He had the full setup, the full rig, spinning records, and the crowd was singing along with the songs, everybody vibing. And my mother was like, "Is this a concert, or is this a lecture? I thought there's more." And I said, "Mom, this is what it is. Like, this is hip hop in the academic space." I said, it was a proud moment for me because, my mother was concerned when I dropped out of school, when I dropped out of college to pursue hip hop. Now I get to speak at the college, and they have to have hip hop before I speak. And it's a good thing. I just want to also say that another magic trick you pulled off is going back and forth with Black Thought, like y'all did on that third verse. Working with Black Thought is like a rites of passage for phenomenal MCs. You have to make a pilgrimage to the land of Tariq Trotter before you really, really could call yourself as a, you know what I'm saying? And the only person who ever went back and forth with Black Thought that effectively, I think, was Malik B. Rest in peace to Malik B. So when I heard you going back and forth with Tariq like that, it just reminded me of just how dope Malik B was. So thank you for that as well.
Oh man, yeah, that was something. I've done stuff with Thought for years, not like on record, but like I've rocked with the Roots and performed with him, whatever. Like he kind of took me under his wing in that way. But so I feel like we're cool, right? Like we're cool. Yeah. That's big bro. But getting in the studio with that man,
it's a different thing.
Like, God. Nail biting. It was a definitely nail biting experience because like, all the coolness go out the window because, when you get in when it's two MCs, like y'all sparring, y'all,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was immense pressure for me to, level up with him, like, and then also do him proud because I consider him to be, a mentor. I consider him to be, one of the dopest to ever do it. And I'm just glad it came out good because that's actually one of the few times I actually write in the studio I've actually written in the studio with another MC. So added to that was like this like uncomfortable experience to me that added pressure. And he, he's so cool. He got his glasses on, he talking. Right. And I'm like over here in the corner, like, oh my God, I gotta do it.
That pressure makes diamonds, though.
Yeah. That was definitely
pressure busts pipes and makes diamonds.
Mm-hmm. It was a definite rite of passage for sure.
Revolution, your album's lead single, is very much a rallying cry to resistance. And it also has a music video that touches on protest scenes. A lot of the media and a lot of the people of color have since moved on from the Black Lives Matters protest movement. And do you feel like it's your job as an MC to keep people going and paying attention to this path of much needed revolution?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's always been the artist's role. I feel like artists have always been at the forefront of revolutions, at the forefront of immense change in the world. They've always been centered providing that soundtrack, whether it's, was hip hop, with the message coming out, or jazz music was at the at the foreground. But it's always been, I've always had revolutionary artists present in my life. Like, Gil Scott-Heron in The Last Poets, and, like Nikki Giovanni, and all these people who were tasked with, and they tasked themselves with this, to speak to what was actually happening, to amplify the voices of those who didn't have the platform or the opportunity or access to cry out, about what was happening. So it is, we talk about Nina Simone, how she always said, Nina Simone, another one, our artist's duty, is precisely that, to talk about what's happening in the world, because we have the privilege of being able to use our voices in such an influential way. So as long as I'm a Black woman, I'm going to speak about the things that affect me as a Black woman, the things that affect my people. And it's not even really a conscious choice. It's something that, it's like breathing, you know what I'm saying? So it's definitely something that has always featured in my work and will continue to feature in my work.
Yeah, and we're better for it. You're speaking consciously as a Black woman. And so I want to get into the weeds a little bit, just a little bit of the political weeds, just a little tiny bit. You have lent your artistic voice and your support artistically to another Black woman, Kamala Harris, with the song She Could Be Next. And Kamala is, a song is a partnership with Aloe Black and Ginger Shankar. Kamala Harris has been criticized for a number of things. One of the things they say, well, she's not Black because she also identifies as an Indian American person. That's not a valid, in my estimation, the whole Kamala is not Black is not a valid criticism. But there are valid criticisms of her time as a DA in the Bay Area, the activist community in particular. It's very critical of some of her policies, some of the things she's said and done. There are Black folks who are very anti-DNC. There are Black folks who feel like the DNC, the Democratic Party, is taking the Black vote for granted. So how do you feel about the backlash from folks like that when you're making a record like this?
Well, that song in particular was actually speaking about the members of the squad, Rashida.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So that's talking about like Alexandria Cortez and Rashida and all that, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. It
was
okay. And it's Stacey Abrams as well.
Stacey Abrams, right? And you're in Georgia, and Georgia is now the new political football. Georgia is the hotbed for creating change. But yeah, talk to me more about that record, and but also I want to let you continue. But if you can, maybe answer some of the other part of the question, because Stacey Abrams and them are aligned with the Biden campaign and aligned with the DNC, and people were floating Stacey Abrams' name as a possible vice president candidate as well.
I am not a person who is as well versed as I should be in terms of politics. Mm-hmm. And my faith in this political system is absolutely not strong. I've only recently understood the importance of being engaged on a local and state level of politics, because I think that there's more room to move and room to put pressure on, candidates and allow for real, actual transformation and change to take place. Mm-hmm. I understand, why people, I vote because I feel like it doesn't take much of my time to vote. And unfortunately, I feel like I'm pressured to do the whole lesser of two evils thing. When I think broadly about...
You feel pressured to do it?
No, pressured on my own self. I don't
pressuring
agree.
yourself.
I don't agree with the two-party system. I don't agree that we should
Me
have
neither.
to. We should have to. Essentially, we're forced to pick.
I understand.
So, so while I don't support nor condone many of the policies of the president-elect and the vice president-elect, I chose to get that fool out of office because I felt that he was much more dangerous if he were allowed to maintain that space for 4 more years. So I think that those criticisms are valid, both of the Biden-Harris administration and of the DNC's taking the Black vote for granted. This particular project, however, was in support of the congresswomen nicknamed the Squad, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, who've been working really hard to kind of bring about a new vision of this political landscape. They've been shaking stuff up. They have been working hard for equity and reform, and really just challenging the old guard who have long since sought to maintain the privileges and entitlements of white America at the expense of everyone else. So I felt good about lending my artistic support behind this project. But back to Biden and Harris, both of them, Biden through his support of the crime bill, and his more moderate stances on legislation during his tenure as senator, and then Harris during her time as a DA, her problematic prosecutorial history, both of them have played critical roles in furthering the criminalization and mass incarceration of Black people in this country. And that absolutely deserves outrage. That absolutely deserves criticism and challenging of these then candidates. But we were in a particularly tough position this year because we just wanted Trump out of office. So, there is, this disregard for our very real demands that our needs be met, our community needs be met, that we be served, that we are provided with the resources that we require. And it makes it even more challenging when there are those of us who are such hardline loyalists that we don't even question when a candidate is presented to us. We don't even question their political history. We don't even question their legislative history. It just is enough that they are, a Democrat, and then throw in a Black candidate into the mix, and that just absolutely cinches the vote, and that's all that's needed. And I think that sometimes we become so enamored with the symbolism of having a Black candidate in these, political offices, whether it's vice presidency or the presidency, that we allow that to distract us from these very real questions about how has this particular candidate, how have they voted in the past? What have they done to implement real change within the communities they claim to serve? And now we're starting to say it is not enough that, you issue these empty platitudes and you go on the Breakfast Club and, you pander. It's no longer enough. We want real answers. We want real work, done, during your tenure. So I absolutely believe that, we have a right and should be vocal, about what these politicians have done in their past, and we have to continue to figure out ways that we can put pressure on them if and when they get into office. As with the Biden-Harris administration, they're in office now, they have been elected. Whether it's supporting these more progressive PACs that are working to craft policy to put directly in front of, the president, the vice president, to give them a chance to actually show and prove to the communities that they have in the past neglected, whether it's, really, really getting behind grassroots politicians and grassroots community groups, and helping to bolster the campaigns of those who are more in line with our vision. Or, just kind of working with independent progressive political parties as well. So that we don't feel like we're backed into a corner. So yeah. But I think that the era is long past where we are no longer challenging, these Democratic candidates. We are no longer demanding that they need to serve the people who put them in office. Or who could potentially put them in office. So yeah, let's keep being critical. Let's keep speaking out.
You often spit bars fast, but I know you also know how to slow down and practice meditation. Love the book of Art of Living from India and understand breath work. Can you speak to us on how a lot of people often don't know how to breathe properly, and also how your meditation, yoga, and breathing practices help give birth to an album like this?
For me, personally, spiritually, and professionally, breath plays a tremendous role. But we often are not aware of how prominently the breath functions in our physiological functions, how we can actually kind of control basic things like the beating of our heart, but in anxiety levels and things like that. We don't think about that because breath is so second nature. But for me, in studying breath work and studying through Art of Living, which spoke to the healing power of meditation, the healing power of self-reflection, and how that features so prominently in some of the personal themes of my work. It's a huge part of my life, and finding ways to kind of like meld those two things. When we talk about creating spaces, like in the song Deliverance, I talk about creating a stress-free zone, but it's really important for us as Black people, who face so many aggressions in the world, micro and macro, to come back to our personal spaces and have that time, spaces of joy, spaces of solitude, or around loved ones and family that can provide that for us. But breathing is so powerful. Like, even for me, like, I still get anxiety before I perform, but having my sage and then being able to center breath as a part of my pre-performance process is so important for me. Like, I used to do all kinds of herbs. I used to have holy basil and stuff before ashwagandha before a show. But when I added breathing into my work, not only did it improve my performance, into my process rather, not only did it improve my performance, but it also helped to kind of still some of that nervousness. So yeah, it is so important for me to kind of keep talking about that. I actually want to create something educational around the breath and spirituality and music, because it's
that's that respiration.
Yes.
And breathe in, breathe out.
It can stop you from punching someone in the face for sure. Sitting back and taking a nice controlled breath and then moving on about your business.
I mean, if we think about how so many things it controls, if you're feeling nausea, breathing throughout that, throughout that and kind of calming that. Again, speeding the speed of your heartbeat,
Sometimes you just need to let it go though. Sometimes, because I was just thinking about the other night when I was super hungover and I was trying to mentally breathe through it. I got this. I'm not. You know what? I just need to let this toxic stuff out of my body. I don't have to throw up.
I'm not nauseous.
Because that's your body's prompt. You need to purge that thing. But sometimes the nausea comes from other things, when you gotta throw up, you gotta throw up. But
my body was no, it's not the breath. It's no.
You need a patch, Talib. You need a hangover patch.
Right, we need to get them.
No, I don't need a hangover patch. I'm not. It's just you know what? I was hungover because Trump lost. That's what I
That's
deserve
a good
that
thing.
one. And Dave hosted SNL. It was a good night. It reminded me of why I don't drink like that anymore.
Also,
the
you can do what
body.
the white women do, and they go and get those IVs of like.
Oh no, white women, we do that every day over here. We over here
you
IV'd
get
up. Drip.
IVs?
There's drip life over here. We dripping off. I might go get a drip as soon as I finish this interview.
All right, drip life.
Now, Sha-Rock, I want to shout out some of my good friends and some of my favorite artists and people, Tef Poe and the Rebel Diaz crew. Revolutionary-minded artists. You're on the Leaders and Shooters song from their album. Do you ever lament that skilled MCs who are conscious, like these people, can't find a broader audience?
All the time.
Or don't seem, or it's harder for us to find a broader audience?
Yeah.
Can't is not a word that I want to use. What we said?
Yeah, all the time. It's it definitely feels intentional. That we are not given that platform to wake people up, shake people up, talk about the things that matter, talk about governments and policies that seek to keep us enslaved. It definitely feels, and I feel is in many respects intentional. I felt like that throughout the course of my career too. I mean, Tef, I think, just got an opportunity to get on a platform that will expand that access. But it's crazy, like how I know so many ill MCs who are also super political and super insightful that just aren't able to reach the masses like they need to be reached. And even like internationally, I feel like there's a lot more opportunity internationally than it is in the States sometimes. But even that, like, you have to have an in, or you have to be linked with the right person to like open up that world for you. But yeah, you have to work twice and thrice as hard, a lot of times, to get that visibility. So I try to do as much as I can, like, if I believe in what they're doing, to hop on a track with people who I feel like are like-minded and are on the level as far as skill, so we can create some of that magic together.
Yes, indeed. It's a great song. Awesome track.
I live a fake plant-based diet because I'll have an Impossible Burger with turkey bacon and regular
I do the
cheese
same thing.
on it. But it makes me feel good. At least it's not all meat. But right. You are an advocate for a plant-based living, and you work with Hip Hop is Green. Can we discuss that, and can you explain your approach and how you arrived at that method of eating?
So when I was 12 years old, I had this teacher who gave me this book called What's Wrong with Eating Meat from like the 70s. I had a picture of like all these animals on it, and it talked about the impact of plant-based eating on the environment and on the body, and so at that time, a lot of people were going raw and vegan and stuff, and my sister ended up going raw vegan. And that book, along with my love of animals, I was at that time like intent on becoming a veterinarian or a zoologist or something like that, made me decide to like give up meat. And once I did, I didn't look back. But partnering with Hip Hop is Green is so dope because we carry that education to areas that aren't informed about what a plant-based diet, how it can improve their health, and oftentimes they don't even have access to fresh foods. So to be able to share with them, like, if you're in Baltimore or whatever, like there are ways that you can shop at this particular store and get, grains and legumes and things like that aren't as expensive. And they are, here are meals, that there's a vegan chef that prepares meals for the parents and children alike. And here are easy meals you can prep for your kids. Here are like recipes, and they get like samples and stuff like that, and we perform for them and talk to them about how plant-based eating has impacted our lives. And it was formed by a guy who, you know, is a super hip hop head, Keith. He saw how like so many, you know, legends in hip hop were passing away, you know, through like health related issues. And thinking about how influential hip hop is on a global scale, and how, you know, sometimes like the culture can like laud, you know, very decadent you know, ways of living. You know, we gonna smoke these cigars, we gonna, you know, eat this steak and this lobster, and like, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, these are people who didn't have anything, you know, came from bare cupboards. So like, that's what it means to be successful, and that's what it means to indulge in stuff. So I understand.
I ate so much shrimp, I got iodine poisoning.
Yes.
It's an actual lyric.
It is a lyric. I know that song.
And that's what it is. But when we can use our platforms using the same vehicle and talk about like, okay, there's other ways that we can, you know, utilize our success and wealth and be healthy, you know what I'm saying, and set examples for, you know, our listeners and our communities to take care of ourselves, because we already have so much that, you know, affects us negatively or impacts us negatively psychologically and physically. You know, there's starting to be research about, you know, cancers and other diseases being symptomatic of racism. Like there's so much that we already have to battle when it comes to our health. If we can do the one thing that is, you know, allows us to prevent many of these diseases, you know, why not do that?
No doubt. Well, like Jazz, I'm also plant-based adjacent. I have a lot of people in my life who live plant-based lifestyles, and they have inspired me. And I try, where I'm at is I try to make at least one meal a day completely plant-based. So my breakfast, this is my breakfast meal for today. You know, but I'm working on it. And people like you inspire me. You inspire me as an MC. Again, I said I would prove that you are more than a regular person. There's nothing regular about you. You are an extraordinary human being. And as an MC, you push me, man. You push me so much. And not many MCs do that. And I can count them on one hand. And you are one of those MCs. So I truly appreciate you being on this show. Our last question for you is, what's next for you?
What's next? Man, now the world is on hold. I'm planning things, but, you know, best laid plans.
I gave up on planning. I was telling them last night, I was like, I used to be the best at planning shit. I don't plan nothing. And I got to say, in this era, and we're blessed to be artists, right? So we're blessed to make our own schedule. We have to acknowledge that most people are not as privileged as we are as working artists. And we worked hard to gain this. This is a hard-earned privilege, but it is a privilege that most people don't have. And most people do not have the type of lifestyle where they can put off planning. And I've been able to put off planning. And I said, my life has been rewarded by me not planning. And I don't know how long this is going to last, but this is where I'm at now.
Yeah, I feel like when you go with the flow and go with the movement of the universe, that can be so rewarding. It's hard for me though, because I'm a Capricorn. I'm super like pragmatic.
Yeah, y'all definitely plan.
It has to be lined up like this. And so it was very interesting the way that, you know, everything transitioned, like everything just fell, you know, to the wayside. But, you know, I'm working on new music. There are very tentative planned, you know, tours, shows, concerts for the latter part of the year. But yeah, I'm continuing to work, and then kind of like planning on, I'm as we've talked, you know, we got to touch on a lot of the things that I'm passionate about. And although I really don't care for social media or the internets or anything like that, but I know, like, I'm inspired to create, like, programming that, like, speaks to, like, the things that I am excited about. So, like, the stuff like the breath work and meditation. So I'm in the process of kind of formulating programming that talks about that, like, talks about my cooking and lifestyle and things like that. So that's what we're planning to do for the 2021s. And hopefully those things will remain intact.
God willing, God willing. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the People's Party is proud to welcome and present Sha-Rock, the Goddess MC. Thank you for doing our show. We truly appreciate it.
Thank y'all so much. This is really dope.
Yay.
Thank you.
Great way to start the morning.